This means that you provide certain things that the mind needs. The mind needs a certain degree of stability. It needs a certain degree of protection from adversity. It needs stimulation. It needs what we call rethinking. So, let me now talk about rethinking. Consider your personal mind like a great vat of concrete that is all wet and viscous. If you do not stir it and keep it moving, it hardens into a certain form. Once it hardens, it is very difficult to make it fluid once again. So, it is very important that the mind is stimulated. Its greatest stimulation will come from knowledge, for as the mind is brought into service to knowledge, it is continually stimulated with new ideas and new experiences and the requirement that things be re-evaluated according to their relevance to present time. This keeps stirring the mind, so to speak, and keeps it fluid. It keeps it young, fresh and active. If the mind is allowed to harden, its ability to respond to new influences, new information and new relationships becomes severely hampered. Past a certain point, it is not able to respond to new things at all. This is when the mind ceases to be a living organism. This is when having a healthy relationship with the mind becomes very, very difficult. If the mind is following knowledge, which means that your mind is attending to a greater power within you, a greater power that it can neither design nor harness, it is required to rethink things over and over again. Without service to a greater power, people will not rethink their ideas. They will only fortify their position. Rethinking means that you must redefine your position and in some cases abandon it altogether. Rethinking is a necessary part of education. Certainly, when you think of your education, even in a formal sense in your schooling, you will realize that the courses or programs of study that were most stimulating required you to rethink and to entertain different perspectives and points of view, consider new facts and alter your position or take no position at all. In order for the mind to be able to rethink, it must have something beyond itself to which it is responding and which it is serving. The only thing that this can be is knowledge within you. Therefore, the mind's healthy relationship is with knowledge, which is like the real you behind you, the real being behind the temporary person. This sets things in right order. This sets things in the right order with yourself physically as well, for the body is meant to serve the mind, and the mind is meant to serve knowledge, or spirit. This is a tremendous change from being in an individual human state of mind, where the mind is meant to serve the body and spirituality is thought to serve the mind, if it is thought of at all. Therefore, to develop a healthy relationship with the mind, you must focus on knowledge and allow the mystery of knowledge to exist within you. The mind needs certain things that are concrete in order to establish a foundation or a belief system. Without a belief system, the mind is in a state of chaos and cannot be focused in any direction. This is what insanity is, when the structure of the mind, or the structure of thinking, has broken down to a point where even the will of spirit cannot work through it. Here the mind has fallen into disarray and dysfunction. Therefore, the mind needs certain assumptions and familiar surroundings, at least to a certain point, in order to function effectively. Just like the body needs food, water, shelter and clothing and a certain amount of soothing, the mind needs reassurance, compatible relationships, a stable environment, at certain points, and new ideas. These are its needs. Neglect these needs, and the mind will fall into disarray, and you will not be able to have a healthy relationship with it. You can have certain ideas that the mind holds to, and this is fine. You can have certain relationships that stimulate the mind, and this is necessary, although few people, indeed, have this as a benefit. But you must have something that the mind can serve, that stimulates it and that exists beyond it. This keeps the mind fluid, which allows rethinking to occur. This allows the mind to be active and alive. This enables you to establish a healthy relationship with the mind. Unless this relationship is being cultivated, you cannot work with the mind. You will either try to take it over or you will be running from it. Let us bring this into the realm of spiritual practice, for here is where you encounter the mind directly. When you are learning the way of stillness, which produces an environment in which knowledge can emerge within you, you realize that the mind is constantly thinking, constantly moving, distracting you, taking you away, and so forth. You find here that as it is doing this, you are actually within your mind, for your reference point is still in your mind, and so wherever it goes, you go. In practice, you are trying to bring yourself back to a position of objectivity and observation, but the mind takes off, and it takes you with it. It goes here, there and everywhere. It thinks about things that are grand, and it thinks about things that are ridiculous, and it imagines all kinds of scenarios, little dramas in which you then find yourself. It is like a television that is running all the time. So, in spiritual practice, how do you deal with the television running all the time? Here you set a certain focal point for yourself. It is like tuning the television into one kind of frequency or channel. You have to learn to do this, and only practice will enable you to do it. You have to have a focal point, and your mind has to have a focal point as well. In the Steps to Knowledge program, there are many different focal points that are introduced. For instance, you were asked to focus on the word ran. The mind continues to go all over the place, but you bring it into focus on this word and this sound. There are other focal points, the fire of knowledge within you, a still point within you, your breathing, a part of your body. You can do this with your eyes closed or with your eyes open. This brings the mind into focus, which amplifies its power and establishes for you a position outside the mind. Focusing establishes and enables you to experience this position outside the mind. Over and over, you practice hundreds and thousands of times, like practicing musicians who must practice scales over and over again. They never give up this practice. You must practice focusing the mind in your spiritual practice. As you do this over time, the mind becomes less chaotic. It becomes more uniform and more compliant to whatever you ask it to do. It also demonstrates its needs to you so that you can recognize what it needs. For example, the mind needs a certain amount of similarity. It can't be dealing with new things all the time. It needs to rest on things that are familiar. At the same time, the mind needs new ideas and new stimulation. The mind needs to fall in line behind knowledge. These things all have to be balanced together, and this will require skill and wisdom on your part. If you ask the mind to have new experiences all the time, you will wear it out and it will not be able to function. It cannot integrate new information continuously and will end up going into revolt against you if you are too oppressive with it. So, there is a question of balance here. Knowledge provides this balance because knowledge provides new information and stimulation and then long periods of stillness. During these periods of stillness, the mind is allowed time to integrate itself. Rethinking is allowed and encouraged. There is stimulation, and there is time for adjustment, rethinking and reassociation. In this way, like taking steps, the mind can grow and progress while maintaining its inner stability.